Welcome to Drink Beer, Think Beer, the podcast that gets to the bottom of every pint. I'm John Hall. This week, we're back in Nashville for the second of three conversations recorded before a crowd at Funkfest, the amazing event hosted by Yzoo Brewing and Embrace the Funk. And sitting across from me on this episode is Mr. Garrett Oliver. He's the brewmaster of the Brooklyn Brewery. And he'll be coming up in just a moment. But first, please go visit allaboutbeer.com. There, you can find original articles, reviews, news, insights, and podcasts. You can listen to shows like Beer Travelers, Brewer to Brewer, and the All About Beer podcast simply by searching All About Beer wherever you listen to shows. This show and all of the work we do is supported by you. Please go visit patreon.com/allaboutbeer to help keep the content fresh. And a few bucks goes a long way to fund writers, photographers, creators, and editors. And if you'd like to learn more about advertising on this show or other shows, please email info@allaboutbeer.com. Again, let me give praise to Funkfest. Brandon Jones and Linus Hall, two brewers that I've known for years, have put real thought into creating a tasting event that focuses on spontaneous fermentation, but also makes way for other delightful beers. With copious amounts of food, a great soundtrack, and alternative drinks like coffee and kombucha, that fest brings together brewers who are passionate about the beers they make, tradition, ingredients, and it's fun, easy, and informative. Jones asked me to host a series of panels during the fest, casual conversations with leading brewers on a variety of topics. So this week, I'm thrilled to be speaking with Mr. Garrett Oliver. As any fan of good beer knows, he is the brewmaster of the Brooklyn Brewery, the author of the Brewmaster's Table, the editor-in-chief of the Oxford Companion to Beer. He's been brewing craft beer since 1989 and is a veteran of over 1,000 beer dinners and tastings in 16 countries. He was an original board member of Slow Food USA, and he later on to become a counselor of Slow Food International. In 2014, he was the recipient of the James Beard Award as the country's top drinks professional. And in 2020, he founded the Michael James Jackson Foundation for Brewing and Distilling, a 501c3 grant-making nonprofit organization that funds scholarships for technical education and brewing and distilling fields for people of color. And in 2022, he was enthroned by the Knights of the Brewers Fork of Belgium, descendants of the ancient Brewers Guild. We're going to talk about all of that. Recorded at Funkfest 2023 before an enthusiastic crowd, here's our conversation. Talk to me about the art of living well.
Oh, man. Well, I think that one thing people will know if they follow me on Instagram or whatever else is that, my life does not revolve entirely in any way, shape, or form around beer. In fact, many people, when looking at my Instagram, they're like, well, how long have you been a chef? I'm like, I've never been a chef. I'm very serious about cooking, and I'm very serious about eating. And I think that, living well is all about, not only just, actually going out there and enjoying things, but it's about knowing what there is to enjoy. And I think that's a big part of what I've tried to do with writing and whatever else, because a lot of people don't even know what's out there for them to taste. And I think that I've discovered over time that when you don't put a lot of your ideas in front of people, especially if you say, well, this is too outlandish for people to handle, there's a word for that. And the word for that is ego. That's you telling yourself that you're special and they're not.
Okay.
You think you're saving them from something, because, they can't handle, heavily smoked things, or they can't handle, okay, looks like she's about 80 years old, she's got a blue rinse, and so you don't want to serve her, the barrel-aged 12%, whatever.
I don't know why you got to bring my grandma into it, but that's fine.
But the thing I discovered over time is, first of all, who the hell do you think you are?
Yeah.
You don't even know who she is. You don't know where she's been. You have no idea what she's done. And you have already made a decision about what she can handle. And so part of the fun is really going all the way there and showing people what's on your mind and trying to show people something brand new to like. I'm trying to find something brand new to like every day. Doesn't matter whether it's music or it's food or it's drinks or like I would like to learn something, and if I can add a little bit of that, kind of DNA, so to speak, to my overall life, that's something to know. And if I don't like it, well, that was a few seconds wasted, maybe. Hopefully not a lot of money. But, I don't regret trying things and not liking it. It's kind of that's what taste is, isn't it? It's like you like some things, you don't like others. If you like everything, then you don't have any taste. So there you go.
The beer industry writ large is, it's usually, I don't know. I don't know if people are often thinking about the finer things, or they're not thinking about taste or flavor all the time. But these days, a lot of the conversation is, what's new or what's rare, or, how can I post something on Instagram to sort of make somebody else jealous, or show a bottle that I've gotten or something else like that. And the reason that I enjoy following you on social media is because you are opening up these new experiences. You're getting people to think about things in a way that maybe they won't. And the other thing about sort of well living is, and we've had these conversations before, but like a lot of times if folks are out on the road selling beer, it's whatever we can do and get a meal standing up, or, we're going to have a bag of Doritos in our car kind of thing. And you have set these expectations of how you want to live your life when you're out in the beer space. And I really feel like it's a lesson that we should all be paying attention to, of like having a nice meal, of stopping and having a conversation, of, not getting over your skis, of not, and you lead by example with that. And I'm wondering why the industry hasn't followed you on that.
Well, I think, people live their everyday lives and everybody's busy, et cetera. I've decided to prioritize certain things. And there's like a bunch of stuff that I just, don't want to do. And there's a lot of things I want to do in life. And I think it's just as important, in your day-to-day life to do the things you want to do, but it's also important not to do the things you don't want to do. And that may include, like, I'm not eating any stuff like that. For example, if you got yogurt and the yogurt is fat-free yogurt, like, I'm sorry. Like, I'm not eating that.
Yeah.
I just won't eat it. I know I was, listening to a whole thing about, like, how trigeminally your mouth perceives fat versus the things that are put, various starches and gums and whatever else they put into these, things. I mean, this morning at the hotel, and I'm not, not staying at a great hotel, okay? So I went downstairs and I'm like, I forgot my pour-over rig, so I resigned myself to the not great coffee, and I whispered to the guys, like, guys, my coffee, do you guys have any milk? They got 2% milk, and they had 5 different flavors of fake milk. They had almond milk, so they had real almond milk, they had 2% milk, and they had, cremora or whatever else in French vanilla and hazelnut. The thing that I couldn't get was milk. Which would have been, you would have thought really simple. Can't have it. And I'm kind of like, I realize that I'm spoiled because I don't live in that world anymore. I did, when I lived inside the Matrix in the 70s, but since I got out and I learned about, I took the red pill and I learned about the good things, I'm like, I don't want to eat that anymore. I will leave the building and walk 3 blocks away and get myself a cup of coffee with some half and half or some cream in it. Like, I'm not going to do that anymore. And I think that's,
Yeah, and but the fact that you put the thought into it, and the thought that you are willing to then walk those 3 blocks, I think is just something that we all need to be listening to for our own lives. Every time I have these conversations with you, I want to be a better person because you are just doing this in an uncompromising way. And I think your beers reflect that as well.
Well, what's interesting, Carlo Petrini, I worked for Slow Food for a number of years. I was one of the founders for Slow Food USA. And Carlo Petrini, who founded Slow Food, part of the manifesto of Slow Food was the idea of the defense of the right to pleasure. The defense of the right to pleasure. Now, the funny thing about, I've learned a lot from the Italians. When you hear the word pleasure in English, it sounds vaguely dirty. right? Pleasure. You're like
not even vaguely.
Not even vaguely, right?
Because we're all Puritans.
It's like when you say pleasure to an Italian, there is nothing dirty about pleasure to Italians. It's like pleasure is the thing that I'm trying to get in day-to-day life. I don't like pain; it hurts me, and I like pleasure; it makes me happy. So it turned out when they started slow food, which is kind of an eco-gastronomical movement, when they would go to raise money, at an Italian company, and they would say, well, you want to preserve the land and you want to preserve, your grandmother's tomato sauce and the real tomatoes that are needed to make it. Everybody understood what they were talking about. Right. You can't explain. You have a word in the United States like, oh, foodie. So-and-so's a foodie. I'm a foodie. They're a foodie. Try to explain to an Italian what a foodie is. It's like, well, it's a person for whom, food and drink are some of the primary and most important pleasures in their life. And they're like, who else is there? They don't really, they don't know anybody for whom that's not true. And so I kind of learned, I learned from them about that defense, defending your time and and that doesn't mean that you don't eat a greasy slice of pizza. It means that I like a greasy slice of pizza.
Right.
And I'm going to eat it when I want to eat it.
Yeah.
And when I would like something else, I'm not going to do it. I have 3 rules when I go out on the road with salespeople. And we love salespeople. Without them, we can't sell our beer.
For those listening in,
if you're
body language emphasis on
if you're being brought in from the home brewery and you're visiting another state and they're taking you, you might have 5 different things you're doing that day.
Right.
And then you have a beer tasting from 6 to 8:30, and then the beer tasting is over. If you're not careful, they will drop you off at the curb at 8:45 and say, see ya.
Yeah.
And now you're in town by yourself. So there are 3 rules. If we're having a beer tasting and it's not a dinner, if it's a dinner, I eat the dinner. If it's not a dinner, it's like there has to be dinner. 2, we have to be sitting down. 3, it cannot be at the venue. That's it. I don't care what it is, but the things that prevents, because they're like, oh, we already ate chicken wings at the bar. It's like, guess what? I just flew 2 hours out to your beautiful state to help you support whatever else, and I do not eat chicken wings standing up at a bar. That's what I'm not going to do today. I did not get on a plane to come talk for 3 hours
what if
and then
really
eat chicken wings. Sitting down, not at the venue.
Okay.
And then I will eat the chicken wings.
All right. How does this approach to your life? Actually, can you tell us what we're drinking?
Well, I've got a bottle.
I know
of
you're drinking a bottle of Cantillon next.
Actually,
to you.
what I got is dregs of Cantillon. If you are, first of all, I should tell you that if you're got our beer now, I will warn you. I will put it that way that it is 9.5. More like 8.5%. No, it's not 10-1. I'm thinking about the elements that went into it. Okay, so this is called Realm of Possibility. This beer started off as a beer that we used to make, a Belgian strong golden called Local One.
I remember Local
late
One.
and lamented before all the kids decided that they don't want 750 bottles because they don't have any friends in real life, and they all,
Oh man. That is shots fired at this crowd. Holy crow.
Hey, look, for like 30 years, I've been making beer professionally since 1989, right? For 30 years, that bottle was fine. You would sit down, and it's like you have it with 3 or 4 of your friends. And a few years ago, people started to say, well, the bottle's too big. I'm like, too big for what? It's like, well, I can't drink it by myself. I was like, drink it by yourself? Why would you want to drink it by yourself? Don't you have any friends? And they kind of look away. And you're like, you don't have any friends, do you? You're at home drinking alone. And it's like, damn, that what a sad idea that is. I'll tell you what, the wine people don't have that problem. They don't have that problem. They're like, you get a bottle of wine, you're either an alcoholic and you drink that whole bottle yourself, or you're gonna find some people to drink it with, which I think is a healthier thing. But I digress. We don't do the 750 bottles anymore because you can't sell them. there are some people who can sell them, and God bless them. If you are at a beautiful place like Jester King and you're surrounded by trees and you're there on property, people will drink those bottles all day long, and good for them. But, even Jester King's going to cans? Oh, man. Well, look, I'm not hating on cans. I'm just saying, the mystique that we feel, they're like, yeah, Grandpa, let's get you back to bed. It's like, okay, fine. Anyhow, this is a beer, started off Local 1. Then to this, we added Refraction, which is a beer that we made with Russian River Brewery a couple of years ago. This was a really fun project. Vinny and I talked about making this beer for about 10 years, and we finally got around to it. In between, he built a little brewery in Windsor with an okay cool ship room. And so the idea became, okay, you're going to take the cool ship beer, the wort, inoculated overnight, but not yet fermenting, shipped it cross-country at 52 degrees. That was 30 barrels. We brewed 300 barrels of wort, blended them together, and then put it straight into barrels. So barrel fermented beer with 100% wild Sonoma yeast. That became Refraction. So that's about 20% of this beer. The rest of it is Local 1 infused with pomace, which is what you get when you squeeze off your fermenting white or red wine. In this case, it was Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay. More Chardonnay than Sauvignon Blanc. So you have skin contact, you have a blend in of a fraction of wild beer, and then an underlying 9% Belgian Strong Golden. And what we're trying to do with all of our beers, whether you're drinking Brooklyn Lager or you're drinking Black Chocolate Stout, is the qualities balance, structure, and elegance. That's kind of I don't think there's a Brooklyn Brewery house flavor, but there is a Brooklyn Brewery house feeling. And okay, it's a squeaky feeling.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to drink this little splash of Cantillon.
You're living your best life right now, yeah.
Yeah, I know.
I'm like,
I'm living that life and this life because I'm going to get some of that in a minute. But here's the thing about the Cantillon as well. Balance, structure, and elegance. When a lot of us will brew some of these sour beers, we might go sometimes really, really sour with them, and then you go back and you drink Bone and you drink like Cantillon Goods, and you're like, they're not that far out there.
Yeah.
The funkiness is subtle. Everything kind of comes together in this really beautiful way. And it is a useful thing to kind of go back to the source, and you kind of realize, oh, there's a reason why these people are famous the world over for making wonderful stuff. And so my problem isn't with cans; it's with the fact that we're not in the American beer industry really that interested these days in DNA from other cultures, creative DNA. It's all now kind of a hothouse where it's like you basically marry your sister and you end up with idiot children. And the idiot children is basically thousands of hazy IPAs that taste exactly the same because you only drink things that are from your neighborhood. And you don't drink anything from Belgium, you don't drink anything from Germany, you don't drink anything from, so all basically is this little weird ecosystem. We wouldn't even have craft beer if we hadn't traveled. You couldn't get the sort of stuff that we make in those days unless you traveled or you knew somebody who was importing it. And that's where we learned the stuff from. And then you're like, oh, well, if it's not from my neighborhood, I'm not really interested. It's like, really? What a fun life you're leading.
So how much then does the way that you approach living your life show up in your beers?
Increasingly.
But you've been doing this for a while. And thinking about this conversation, I was thinking about the cocktail-inspired beers that you were doing 15 years ago, the concoction based on the penicillin, and what you were into outside of your beer life coming into your recipes. And how has that evolved?
I think that's evolved from taking not just flavor ideas. but taking cultural ideas as well. Often, I mean, some people don't know this, but we were the brewery that invented collaborations. And by that, I mean that there were no collaborations in craft beer before us.
Is that true?
I am 400 years old. I have always been here. And when all of you are dust, I will still be here. No, I mean, it's like...
That's not creepy at all, Garrett. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Beer festival, and you're telling everybody about their mortality, and you're immortality.
That line is literally from Dracula. There's like, I have crossed oceans of time to be with you. But it's true. I mean, I have, and it's like, being around. Yeah. Look, if you're 26. And you're spry, you're good looking, whatever else. You have some advantages, right? You have some advantages. You're new, or whatever else. Yeah. There are advantages. Like, you get to my age, you got to use what you got, and what I've got is that I've seen, I've seen and done more things than you possibly could have. It might be the only advantages I've got, but I'm going to press it. I'm going to use every bit of what I have, and so there are things that I'm going to end up knowing that you haven't gotten to yet. And that's what I kind of bring to bear, in the work. So increasingly, I'm mining different areas, of my life, as you say. When it comes to, I'm learning about. I mean, I'll give you an example. I was at a party the other day for it was a showing for the TV show Shark Tank.
Okay.
And my friends at a company called Burlap and Barrel. They do very, very ethically sourced best spices in the world. I mean, really amazing stuff. And they know every family that they're buying from. And yes, their spices cost 5, 6, 10 times as much as McCormick, but they're also 10 times better.
Okay.
Great stuff. So they went on Shark Tank. At the party, the viewing party, I met a guy named Yzoo. And Yzoo has a company called 50 Hertz. And it's called 50 Hertz because that is the wavelength or the frequency of the signal that Sichuan peppercorns give you. That feeling like you put your tongue to a 9-volt battery.
Yeah.
It actually, they figured out what the frequency is, and it's 50 hertz. Okay. So he imports the very best Sichuan peppercorns by far that I've ever had. So now.
You brewed a beer once with Szechuan.
I haven't yet, but I'm about to.
Okay.
Now, when you get really fresh, and you usually don't get fresh, you get really fresh green Szechuan peppercorns, we usually see red. They smell like a blend of hops, weed, and citrus. I mean, just amazing aromatics. And so right now I'm looking to figure out, okay, first of all, how do I get that aromatic? And then how much of that kind of weird sensation, which is not spicy heat, is not capsaicin,
right.
It's a different thing. How much of that can we add to a beer before you get over weird? And don't steal it. I'm planning to make a beer called Electric Saison.
Okay.
And I wanted to have that aromatic.
You have about 2 weeks to trademark this before this goes out on the podcast.
I'm already on it.
Somebody in the back has already now
And so...
some home
but
brewer.
The thing is, if I wasn't at that party,
right.
If I didn't know the guys from Burlap and Barrel, if I wasn't into spices, I wouldn't have met Yzoo, which I wouldn't now be thinking about Sichuan peppercorns. It's really a direct line of being around food and drink people all the time. It's basically everybody that I know in my day-to-day life. And so in that regard, I'm not saying I don't care about politics or I don't care about movies or whatever else, but in the end, I'm really actually pretty shallow. It's like food and drink is like the main thing on my mind. Don't do it. A lot of the time, and so
did you will that sign to stand back up?
The force has can have a strong effect upon the weak-willed.
My God. He can control inanimate objects simply with the sound of his voice.
I will have a splash of Realm of Possibility if I think we got a few bottles still standing by. First of all, how's everybody like this? I hope you...
As soon as I take the cork off, so I have
apologize.
Yeah, that's all right. It's been sitting there like kind of warm. Yeah. But I think it's kind of at a perfect temperature now. So yeah, I think that, those life experiences, I'm like channeling what's exciting me right now, to the best of my ability.
There are food and beer have been central to, I think, a lot of your contributions to the larger industry and to consumers. And in an email, you told me before this, we are now at the 20-year anniversary of the Brewmaster's Table.
Yeah, Monday will be the official 20-year anniversary, May 8th, 2003. So 20 years and still on the shelf. It's that book, I mean, when the histories are written, is one of the most important books on the subject of beer that has been written in the last, let's say 50 years. It has helped people understand flavors. It has helped people understand relationships better. It has really, I think, launched thousands of careers, both in food and in beer. And I'm not trying to just fluff you up here. No, keep going.
Yeah. But tell me more about how great I am. In the 20 or so years, though, because that work was so important and I think started so many conversations, I don't know if we're still having those conversations. And I don't know if it's just people taking it for granted because, it's just everywhere now. There's 9,000 plus breweries in the U.S. and everybody's doing something with something. And, we're not as dialed in as we used to be. But 20 years out from that book now, where do you see the relationship with beer and food?
I think that, it's something that we've incorporated a little bit more, into our everyday lives. I don't see huge strides necessarily in the restaurant world, and that's as economic as it is anything else. There's no way that we as the beer industry are going to be able to go into the restaurant and say to them, it's like, well, you know that wine that you bought for $30 and you sold for $90, making $60 just on this one bottle? I'd like to replace that with this beer.
It's not going to
which means that you're basically telling somebody, I would like to close your restaurant. That is not something that anybody wants to hear. So I don't do sales, but if I'm talking to a beverage manager, they're like, well, what should we do? I'm like, what you want is a check add-on and a happier customer, right? You want a higher check average, not lower. You want better margin, and you want a happy customer where you have built a little bit of relationship. You can show the customer something brand new to like, and that can happen. So if you, instead of selling somebody like a glass of dessert wine, maybe you sell them an imperial stout that is great with the cheese or great with dessert, and they're shocked. And that shock and delight together is something they've learned something they can then take home and use in day-to-day life. We underestimate, I think, what you can do by some tiny little thing that makes somebody's life 2% better. 2%. I've learned about beer and food and that dinner can be a little bit better every day than it was before. Maybe that's 5% better. Right. You eat dinner every day, right? If dinner is like 5 or 10% better every day, that's a slightly better day. If you can manage to eke out a slightly better day, if you learn something new like that, every week, you'd reach nirvana in a couple of years. And so I kind of feel like
the conversation harder though.
The conversation is harder because we've wandered away from the idea of beer style, and I think a lot of people misunderstand beer style. They also misunderstand like my relationship with it.
Okay.
Because they're like, I've been called like a style Nazi, and I'm like, oh, well, actually most of the beers that I brew are not in any definitive style.
Right.
Brooklyn Lager, what style is that?
What style is it?
American Amber Lager. Okay. We won gold medals at World Beer Cup for it, so it must be. I mean, we're progenitors of it as a style. It's kind of based on Viennese beers, but then dry hopped, etc. but I don't feel a need. Like, what style is realm of possibility? I haven't even thought about that. It's like not a style, it's a beer.
Right.
But style has a super important place. And as consumers, you might not care about this, but I think that you should. But style, essentially, I hate to put it this way, but style is power. It's raw cultural power. When I can say to you, brown ale, American brown ale, and you know exactly what I'm talking about, in 3 words. You can taste it, you can smell it, you know what the history is of it, you have a pretty good idea that it's not going to be a porter, and it's not going to be amber, it's going to have this, you know that it's going to have some chocolate malt, and it's going to have some, you can form an idea in your head. That is absolutely pure power that is what the French know that we don't know. That is why there will never be red champagne. Because when you say what champagne is this and it's not that. And that is why people pay money for it. Because if you don't value this thing yourself, people don't love French food more than they love other food. They don't love it more than they love Thai food. When you have a great French meal, do you feel better? Are you happier than when you eat, great Thai food? No. I mean, great Thai food is unbelievable.
Yeah.
But you will not pay as much money. And part of that is cultural, with some racism blended into that. But also the fact that anywhere you go in the world, if you say to chef, make me hollandaise sauce means one thing. One thing. If you add a flavor to hollandaise sauce, it's not hollandaise sauce anymore. Like you add tarragon, it's béarnaise. You add curry, it's sauce Charon. If you make any deviations whatsoever, it takes on a different name, and you can then explain it. Just like that. So the codification is a framework for where to start. Learn the classics, know how to brew them, and then branch out. And because we have wandered away from that, you can remember all of this. 20 years ago, you had to tell people what an IPA was.
Right.
And you explained the whole thing about like shipping from Britain to to India and whatever else. Then 10 years ago, you didn't have to tell anybody. Everybody knew what IPA was.
Right.
Now, you can't tell anybody what IPA is because you don't know. IPA doesn't actually mean anything.
All right, so that's the second shot that you fired on IPAs in the course of this conversation. And before we got started, so we're here at Funk Fest, and Will is pouring your beers, and he's been helping out with us. And he came up to you before we started and said that your Brooklyn Lager was his entryway into craft beer. And I think that that's true for a lot of those styles. It's 35 years old now. I know it was one of my early beers. Sierra Pale was up there. Red Hook ESB. I mean, some of the Rogue beers. There are all these beers that those of us who have been around long enough can point to as an entry point because there wasn't a lot of choice out there. When the entry point for somebody newly minted at 21, let's just say that they're doing it the right way or legally, is endless choice of IPA that varies wildly from what it used to be and where it is. Does that concern you as a brewer about what the next generation of beer drinkers might dictate for the overall industry?
No, it concerns me about what they're going to know.
Okay.
Because, if you decide after tasting all these different things that, hazy juicy IPA is the thing that you want, great. But not knowing, is the sin, if you like. To not be interested. And so when you say I only really drink things from my neighborhood, it means that you're not interested in the rest of the world, which is the great American sin. We actually believe, if you go to Sao Paulo, Brazil, and you go out to like the market, there's a big food market, you kind of realize you don't know anything about fruit. Okay, raise your hand. How many people here know where cashew nuts come from? What kind of plant?
It's a tree.
Okay, so let me tell you, the cashew, grows. It's a big tree. It grows a fist-size green fruit. It's very juicy. It's a particular flavor. At the bottom of that fruit hangs one little furry pod, and inside that pod is one cashew nut. You've been eating cashews your whole damn life, and you have no idea whatsoever what it is. If this sounds like a shock to you, when you go to the you don't know. We don't know anything. We know like 30 or 40 fruit. A Brazilian person knows 150, right? Who's having more fun?
Sure.
You know, like them or us. And so I think that like not knowing the rest of this stuff is the problem. Like I don't mind like whatever people want to brew. I love like I go by Other Half and pick up, hazy juicy IPAs from them all the time.
Yeah.
It's awesome. I love it. It's part of my, group of things that I like. But what was I drinking all last night with all this wonderful stuff when we were here at the party?
Yeah.
Blind Pig.
Yeah.
All night.
Yeah.
I can't get any Blind Pig in New York.
I know you want to see people get into trouble. You put a bunch of beer industry professionals and inexplicably a couple of writers in a room where we can pour our own Blind Pig, and the night takes a turn at some point.
Yes.
And it's
the bourbon didn't help.
Yeah. Or did it?
Or did it? It helped me, in some ways. But no, I think one thing when I said I've done things where I interview other brewers, and a lot of them are brewers making a lot of funky, wild, barrel aged, whatever else.
Yeah. And
I'll ask them, so like, what's your bête noire? What is the thing that you feel is the dark side that you've always wanted to do, but you just feel like people wouldn't accept it from you? And they all kind of turn their eyes away and they're like, I really want to brew Pilsner, man. Every brewer in their heart really wants to brew great Pilsner, because great Pilsner is one of the best things in the world. And if you haven't done it, you don't know how good you are yet.
You have done it. So what's your answer to that question?
Yes, I would like to brew really great Pilsner.
Okay.
We brew really nice Pilsner, and I will happily drink it every day. But like, there is definitely a part of me that wants to make like Schönrammer, kind of just like go all the way there. Will the consumer, on a broad basis in the 30-something countries in which we sell beer, accept something like Schönrammer? Probably not.
Probably not.
Yeah. Now, will I brew that at the brewery and put it on draft? Absolutely. And I get a chance to like play in my own playground, but you have commercial realities. It doesn't mean that you don't love your everyday beers, but it's the same for chefs.
Yeah,
I know chefs. I was reading a cookbook that isn't out yet. I'm going to provide a blurb where they talk about taking killing your darlings, taking the favorite thing off the menu because it's been there for like 5-6 years. And people screaming.
Yeah.
And I still have, there's 1 or 2 dishes I still haven't forgiven them for taking off the menu.
In that vein, your brewery and Sriracha Ace, that's that for me.
Yes. And, I feel absolutely the same way. That was the only idea that I ever had where I felt like something just spoke to me. I tasted an ingredient, and I could have turned around right there and written the recipe for Sriracha Ace on the back of a napkin in 30 seconds.
Really?
It told me exactly what it wanted to do and what it wanted to be. And it was like that aha moment that you hope as a creative person you're going to get.
Yeah.
Your whole life. It happened once.
And that was Sriracha Ace.
And that was it.
Huh.
Yeah, I never had something that was like that. It just went boom. And it's such a weird hop. And we basically made that hop. I mean, Darren Gamache will tell you, we made that hop. But, of course, we are engaged in fashion. We like to think that we're not. We like to think that we're in this beautiful, immutable thing. But we're all engaged in fashion. And things, come into fashion, they go out of fashion. And Belgian beers,
I know.
As much as we all love them here, I mean, a beer like Duvel, Duvel was in every decent restaurant in New York City. It was on every beer list. I was jealous. It was in every corner store. I haven't seen a Duvel in a long time. I haven't seen a Chimay in a long time. You don't see Orval all over the place like you used to. The Belgians are kind of gone. I mean, you can find them, but you got to go looking for them now. Whereas I didn't used to have to go looking for them. Literally, my corner deli, the basics were in there. You might have to look harder to find Saison Dupont. But now, I mean, go and try to find Saison Dupont.
Most decent bodegas would have.
They would have, but they don't anymore.
Okay.
Now
space, it's 19.2 ounce cans of hazy?
Of hazy, that's it.
Yeah.
All local. And all old.
There is a theme that is emerging in these talks because Vinny was saying the same thing. I'm getting mindful of time, and there's a lot that I want to get through. But one of the things, you were talking about culture, you were talking about creativity. You obviously think a lot about ingredients. And you introduced me on this email to an African super grain known as fonio. And I watched the TED Talk that you sent over about this, and I'm fascinated by it and what beer's relationship with it can be going forward. So for those who are not on our email chain, which is I think everybody aside from the two of us, tell us a little bit about it, and then what it speaks to, how it speaks to you.
Well, I mean, first of all, fonio is a millet type. It is one of the oldest cultivated grains in the world. It's been grown, through Central Africa, just south of the Sahel, for about 5,000 years. It's been cultivated. It was one of the foods that, colonial powers came in and basically swept out. The whole idea of colonialism is that we are going to come and we're going to take everything that you have. We're going to take it. We're going to take your food, and we're going to replace it with our food. You've been growing this, now you're going to grow wheat and corn. We're going to take your language, we're going to take all your money, we're going to take all of your minerals, we're taking everything, and we will leave you with nothing. That's colonialism. And that's what they did throughout that part, of Africa. And they, at the same time, they told people that the food they've been eating for 5,000 years, that's dirty food. That's like not sophisticated. What you want is this, which we're now going to show you how to grow. So how are wheat and corn grown? Almost entirely with enormous amounts of inputs. You need irrigation. You need fertilizer, nitrate fertilizer. You need pesticides. You need fungicides. You need all these various things. Fonio just grows. It can grow, it can rain 3 times in a year, and fonio will give you 2 crops a year. No pesticides, no fertilizer, no fungicides, nothing. Naturally organic, ridiculously nutritious, and that is exactly what the French in Senegal, where I just was, didn't want. Because the people who are working in the government, they then cannot have their friend who sells a nitrate fertilizer and is paying them off selling the nitrate fertilizer in to support the system.
Huh.
But the thing is, nitrate fertilizer is made from oil. You remember the nitrate explosion that happened in Beirut? Thing went off like a nuclear... It's oil.
2 years ago, yeah.
Yeah. It's oil. So the way we make our food is we dump oil on the land. When you put ethanol in your car and you think that it's greener... No, we dumped oil on the land, we grew the corn, we broke down the corn, we fermented it into ethanol, and it's lost 20% of its energy value. And what is that 20%? That's the profit. Those guys got paid, and then our government pays the farmers, a crop subsidy. And then the guy who got the crop subsidy pays for your Senate campaign. That's the way the whole thing works. It's a stitch-up. So the food is now being brought back by the chef, Pierre Chiam, fonio. It's a beautiful grain. It cooks up in 5 minutes like couscous.
Sure.
And if you use it in beer, it turns out that it makes this beautiful beer that smells like Gewürztraminer, like gooseberries and lychee fruit, and all these wonderful flavors. And it has its own kind of amino acid-like bitterness that's reminiscent of sake. All these beautiful flavors.
Huh.
And the thing is, beer is from Africa.
Yes.
Beer is from Africa. North, south, east to west. Every society has its own, brewing tradition. If you go to South Africa, it's Umqombothi. If you go to the Congo, it's Bilbil. they'll be based on different grains, but brewing is central to almost all African societies. In some cases, if they became Islamic countries, that's been set aside or is just like in the villages on the side. But everywhere that you go, people have traditional beer. And so as an African-American brewer, I've always been offended by the idea that, beer is European. Beer's not European. That's like saying food is European. Like, wine is European. Wine's not European. Like, have you been around the rest of the world?
Yeah.
It's like your idea of what you value in wine may be European. And I love these wines too, but don't get ahead of yourself. You don't even know what fruit is. You're like, and you're going to tell people like what's valuable.
Yeah.
You only had 20% of it. So what we're looking to do with our Brewing with Fonio is a few things. One, you have a perfect grain for the future of climate change, which is here.
Yeah.
Two, we're supporting smallholder farmers directly on the ground in Senegal, Mali, Burkina Faso, Nigeria, Ghana, Togo, etc.
So you know where your orders are going.
We know where our orders are going. And for these projects, and I stole this wholeheartedly from the farmer, Chris Newman, community is the deliverable of the project. And I'll say that again. Community is the deliverable. Normally, we go to people and we're like, can you get me a lower price so that I can get my higher margin? I'm running a business. We do not ask these folks that question. Our question is, what do you need in order to grow your business, provide wealth for your family, and get yourself a better future? That's the first question. You eat first, and then we figure out how we're going to make a profit, which is not going to be your problem.
Okay.
And in those beers, that is how we are doing business. So, right now we have 10,000 barrels of Fonio, Brewgooder Fonio Session IPA, 10,000 hectoliters going into 1,200 co-op stores in the UK.
Okay.
Most people have never heard of Fonio, but when they do hear of Fonio and they realize what it is and what it does and how good every aspect of its production is for the earth, for your body, for low glycemic index, everything, they want to know more about it.
Yeah.
And so you find that not knowing has a cost. And we simply accept that the food that we have in front of us is the food. But that isn't true.
Yeah. I like that you are continuing to lead these conversations and to bring them out and to introduce us to, or, introduce beer people at least to new flavors, new ingredients, and new ways of thinking about things. And I know you've always been doing this in your career, but it's nice that you're not just coasting off of something from 35 years ago.
No, I like to tell people, and I appreciate you're saying that, is because people often will want to come and they want to interview me about how things were in the beginning, and I'll reject those interviews. It's like, I'm not a historical figure. I'm 400 years old, but I'm still here.
I was one of those people, and you ignored my emails on that, and I had to write the story anyway.
And it's not like I don't.
Hey, Garrett, tell me about the '80s. And Nope.
I'm moving forward. I love I could tell stories for days about the 80s and 90s, and I don't mind as long as it's balanced with the thing that's exciting. I mean, I'm friends with a band in New York, called LCD Sound System.
I've heard
and I remember one time, this is before their last album came out, and they hadn't had a new album for quite a while, and they were complaining. It's like we're a cover band. I'm like, what do you mean? It's like we're covering ourselves from 10 or 15 years ago, and I feel like a cover band, like we're not those people anymore. And that's why their farewell concert, thankfully they came back, was called Shut Up and Play the Hits. Because that's what people often will ask them.
It's the Simpsons line. It's just skip to the good part.
Yeah, skip to the good part.
Play working overdrive. Yeah.
And James will go on stage. He says, look, I know you people get really nervous, but here's the way this is going to go. We're going to play you 3 or 4 of your favorite old songs. Then we're going to play 1 or 2 songs from the new album, but don't wait. Calm down. Then we're going to play you a few more of the older songs. Then we'll play you maybe one song from the new album. It'll be fine. And then we'll go back and we'll play you some of the old songs. And everybody starts laughing, but it's kind of true.
Yeah, but but if you walk it out to folks.
Yeah.
I am mindful of time because Avery Swanson is coming up next. I'm
glad I do not have to follow Avery Swanson.
And I know the important work that you're doing with the Michael James Jackson's Foundation. It is on your jacket. There it is. Garrett is showing up and showing the. We could obviously talk for hours on the importance of it, the growth of it, the future projections of it. Mindful of time, though, what is your call to action for the foundation right now?
Well, I mean, what we're doing right now, we're on a fundraising drive. So Athletic Brewing has stepped up. They put down a $100,000 challenge grant. And they will match up to $100,000 of donations, which is actually what we spend in tuition every year, and it's 100% volunteer organization. We don't have any employees, so 95+% of the money, goes directly into tuition, and we're providing scholarships for people of color in brewing and distilling for technical education. So we have people doing master brewer right now in Germany. They just got back. They're sending me pictures, with Frank Bone and whatever else. And here's the thing I would say to you. I mean, especially those of you who are brewers, 1% of the people, in the brewing industry. Well, actually, 3% of you take all people that you might consider people of color. Actually, in the brewery, is 3%. The United States is 43% people of color. This is like a stupid business model, regardless of what you think from a moral point of view or whatever else. Because if you separate people out from your culture, guess what? They're going to feel separated. And you're like, well, maybe they're not interested. Oh, no, they're very interested. It's just like, they don't know anybody who even works inside your company, etc. And people would say to me, it's like, well, why don't people of color just go to the regular beer festival? Look around. Okay, now take your own mind and reverse it, right? You show up to a thing, and there are 3 white people at the whole thing. And when you walk up to the counter, people talk to you as if you don't know what you're talking about, even though you've been brewing for 20 years. And you just came from an 8-hour day and you would like to go relax. Would this be how you would relax? No, it doesn't mean that like you're a racist. It means that you're a human. You would like to chill out. And when everybody says, well, everybody's very friendly. They are very friendly. But it's like if you showed up and every time you wanted a great cocktail or you wanted craft beer, there was nobody else in the room who looked like you. Trust me, you probably wouldn't go there. I mean, not very often, because you're a human who wants to chill. And it turns out that when you get everybody together, Fresh Fest, now known as Barrel and Flow, that was the first time I saw an actually fully integrated beer festival. And people were crying. They were spontaneously crying all over the place, because they were so happy to see each other. And you just realize, like, wow, it's really cool when everybody's here, and it looks like America. Our industry doesn't look like America at all, and I think it will be a much better industry creatively and also economically, morally, because that's the person we see when we look in the mirror, only it's not true. It wasn't true for me either. I required 2 to 3 years of experience or this certificate. Never thought about how that simple rule shut out 98% of people, from different backgrounds who might come to my front door. Never thought about it. I'm just like, I want the best people. Best people have 2 or 3 years experience, or they can show me the certificate.
Hey, hang on, Garrett. This is.
Ooh, thank you.
Do you want to tell them what it is?
I don't want to interrupt you. Before you go pointing, a finger at anybody else, you first got to look in the mirror and face some truths. And it turns out racism isn't a feeling; it's a system. And it's an effect. It's what happened. And it doesn't matter if you're black. If that's what you carried out and that's what happened, then the system that you were carrying out was in fact racist. And believe me, that is a hard thing as a black person to look in the mirror and figure out about yourself. So what we are doing in the MJF is we can't handle the whole thing, but we can do our little bit so that you do not have to go deeply into debt, because we know that, that there is no money in your family,
right,
probably, to back you up to get this $20,000 certificate. So it's like, you go handle your studies and we'll handle this part. And then just you go do your thing.
It is in the 2 years that you've been doing this, it is remarkable to see the growth of it, and I'm glad that it's continuing on and people are seeing the value in it.
29 awardees so far, and more to come.
Yeah. I'm sorry we didn't have more time to talk about this, but Garrett Oliver, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you for your time. My thanks again to Linus and Brandon. Questions, comments, concerns, you can email me. It's John Hall. That's JOHNHOLL @allaboutbeer.com, or you can tell me about it on Twitter @John_Hall. A reminder, go visit allaboutbeer.com. There you can check out the podcast page, the merch page, and can read great new content as well as the archives going back to 1979. You can follow All About Beer on social media @AllAboutBeer. And if you're interested in supporting journalism in the beer space, and really I hope you are, email us at info@allaboutbeer.com or go to patreon.com/allaboutbeer. Don't forget, All About Beer has a podcast channel now. Search and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. Steal This Beer has new episodes every Monday, and the BYO Nano podcast comes out on the 15th of every month. For you smoked beer fans out there, check out This Week in Rauch Beer. The Facebook group is easy to search, and on Twitter and Instagram, we are @TW Rauch Beer. As for this show, Nate Schweber does the music, Jeff Quinn designed our logo, and I'm John Hall. New episodes release every Wednesday, and that's when I'm going to be back again to drink beer and to think beer.